Right, Year 10. Here is a video on a very crucial topic that we've been looking at in the Germany module this year. Obviously a topic that came up in the end of year exam as well, to some degree anyway. And that is the rise of Hitler and the Nazis. Essentially how Hitler and the Nazis how Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany and how the Nazis become the ruling party. So a really big topic, a really important topic. It's going to be a fairly mammoth video, this one, I think. So I'll get straight into it because I don't want this to be too long, so you don't get bored. Right, first thing that you need to know about the Nazi Party, or the development of the Nazi Party, is that the Nazi Party starts off, or initially is known as, or named, the German Workers' Party, or Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, if you want to say it in the German. DAP for short, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or the German Workers' Party. So remember that Hitler does not create the Nazi Party, he joins a pre-made party, if you will, the German Workers' Party. Remember that Hitler, after the war, carries on, or stays in the army, carries on working for the army, and is sent to investigate the German Workers' Party, amongst other parties, to monitor them. Obviously, Germany, as you know, after the war was in a lot of chaos. There were a lot of different political parties springing up, some of them quite extreme. Hitler was sent to investigate the German Workers' Party as part of his work for the German Interior Ministry. And he comes across the German Workers' Party. He liked a lot of their policies. I'll come on to that in a minute. And he joined them, becoming their 7th member in September 1919. So really, very small party when he joins. He's the 7th member of the party. Now, as I said before, Hitler joined the German Workers' Party because he shared some of the party's views. In fact, I've got them written down here. So he shared a lot of the party's views. There you go. I'll hold this up so you can see it a bit better. So the German Workers' Party believed that democracy was weak and Germany needed a powerful leader to make the country strong again. So he believed that this new democratic system in Germany doesn't work, it's weak, and therefore you need a strong leader. Jews were responsible for undermining the German economy, a widely held view by not only the German Workers' Party, but many people in Germany were starting to swallow this anti-Semitic propaganda. Communists and socialists had brought about the fall of the Kaiser. Obviously, the Kaiser had been forced to abdicate in November 1918, and the communists were seen, particularly by the German Workers' Party, to have been responsible for that. And the Weimar politicians had betrayed Germany by signing the Treaty of Versailles. But going back to that, if you think back to the Treaty of Versailles, going back to that idea of the Dolchstoss, that the Weimar politicians are the November criminals, and they've stabbed Germany in the back by signing this, the Dolchstoss. Remember as well that the German Workers' Party was led by a man called Anton Drexler. So, as I say, Hitler joins and he's the 7th member of the party. It's already got a leader in the figure of Anton Drexler. But Hitler does play a crucial role in the development of the German Workers' Party, the development into a bigger party. In the early years, he puts together the 25-point programme, which basically lays out all of the new, or all of the established views of the party, and works with Drexler on that to put this 25-point plan together in February 1920. He also is responsible for helping to come up with the change of name. There you go. In August 1920, when they changed the name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP, or Nazi for short, in August 1920. So Hitler plays a crucial role in both of those, developing this 25-point programme and helping to come up with the change of name as well. Other significant developments in this early period that, again, Hitler can take some credit for were the creation of the SA Brownshires in 1921 to act as the paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party. Also, his effective speaking, obviously that's one thing that Hitler is very well known for, his effective speaking, and Remember that in 1921 he is able to oust Drexler because he becomes such a key part of the party because of his speaking and things like that. Because he becomes such a significant member of the Nazi Party, he's able to basically force Drexler out of the leadership and take the leadership from him. There is loads more information on all that. I know I've very quickly skimmed over it. There's loads more information about all that stuff in the textbook for you. So by 1923, the Nazi Party had grown. As I say, Hitler had been the 7th member, and by 1923, it had 20,000 members. So it had really grown quite significantly in just the space of 2 or 3 years. Also, by November 1923, conditions in Germany were essentially ripe for a revolution, in Hitler's mind anyway, as there was still a lot of anger towards the Weimar government because of the Treaty of Versailles and things like that, and a lot of desperation brought about by the hyperinflation crisis, which you already know about. Hitler had also been influenced by what had happened in Italy just a year before, in 1922, with Mussolini. Benito Mussolini, had taken power in Italy with his fascist party by marching on Rome. So Mussolini and the fascists had marched on Rome, they'd taken power in Italy. Hitler sees that and takes quite a lot of inspiration from it. And as I say, that in Germany, Hitler felt that there was this atmosphere that was ready for a revolution. So you know what I'm coming on to talk about already. In November 1923, you end up with, or in Germany, you ended up with the Munich Push, which all the papers put together. So you get the Munich Push in November 1923. So it was on the 8th of November 1923, Hitler and 603 SA soldiers or stormtroopers surrounded the Bürgerbräu Keller, in Munich, beer hall, where the local Bavarian government was meeting up. And speaking of the Bavarian government, some key people that you should know about. There was Gustav von Kahr, who was the Bavarian Prime Minister. Remember that in Germany, each of the states had their own Prime Minister. And Otto von Lossow, head of the German army in Bavaria. So they were both in this beer hall. Hitler and the SA troops marched in, and both were pressured to support the putsch, particularly once Ludendorff had turned up as well. So they're pressured to support the putsch, but they were later allowed to leave by Ludendorff, which was something of a mistake because they essentially prepared the resistance for the putsch. They went and alerted the army and the police, and obviously the army and the police were waiting for the Nazis outside. The next day, so on the 9th of November, Hitler and his supporters marched into the centre of Munich, and they were met by armed police and soldiers, and 16 Nazis, 16 Nazis were killed in the putsch. They were shot at by the armed police, and 16 of them were killed. Now, Hitler was arrested 2 days later and was subsequently, as you know, put on trial in February 1924. Now, Hitler used his trial very significantly. This is the key thing about the Munich Putsch, really. He used his trial, which took place between the 26th of February and the 1st of April, as a stage. He made speeches attacking the Weimar government. He called them traitors, and talked about all the wrongs that had been done to Germany, the Treaty of Versailles and the Dolchstoss and all these kind of things, and blamed the Weimar government. And this trial really does turn Hitler into, just the key thing, a national figure, and his popularity grew. Obviously, up until this point, he was more of a Bavarian figure. He wasn't really known or that well known around the rest of Germany. It was only really a Bavarian thing. But this really does turn him into a national figure. And he was sentenced to just 5 years in prison. Now that's significant. Hitler here has tried to overthrow the government. He could have been executed for it. This was treason, high treason. He tried to overthrow, the attempt would have eventually turned into some kind of national revolution. So he's tried to overthrow the government, and he could have been executed for it. And instead he's just given 5 years, which isn't a lot when you consider, the severity of the crime. And obviously he only served 9 months. He was eligible for parole after 9 months. So he only served 9 months in total in prison. And as we've seen, his conditions in prison anyway were actually pretty cushy compared to other people. Also, as part of the punishment for this, obviously, Hitler is sent to prison. The Nazi Party was also banned, but the ban was weakly enforced and was actually lifted in 1925. So the Nazi Party is very briefly banned. It's weakly enforced anyway, so the party is still able to carry out, party affairs, etc., and meet up and sort things out. And in 1925, the ban's lifted completely. Also significantly, another card, full of cards today, significantly as well, Hitler's imprisonment gave him the opportunity to write his book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, which became kind of the guiding light for Nazi principles over the next decade. People read Mein Kampf, they absorb Hitler's views, things like Lebensraum and whatnot, and the need for conquest. If it hadn't been for him being sent to prison, this might not have happened. So being in prison allows him to write his book. But crucially, I think it's the most important thing about the Munich Push. Crucially, Munich Push leads to Hitler rethinking his plan for seizing power. He's tried an armed uprising here and it hasn't worked. So he realised after this that he couldn't take control by force. He can't do another Munich Push again because the last one didn't work and it's just not going to work. So he would have to gain power through political election and then destroy the system from within. He doesn't want to head up a democratic government, not at all. He hates the Weimar government, he hates democracy. He wants to, become a dictator, essentially. But he's going to have to first get voted in legitimately and then destroy the system from within. That's his new plan. And the Munich Push is crucial to that. If the Munich Push hadn't failed, he probably would have become leader of Germany. But if the Munich Push hadn't failed so spectacularly, he may not have rethought this plan to legitimately get elected, him and the Nazis elected. So between 1924 and 1928, Hitler and the Nazis reorganised the party. I've already done a video on the reorganisation of the Nazi party. I'll put the link in the description below to that video if you want to watch that, in case you've forgotten about how he reorganises the party. Now, after he'd reorganised the party and done those measures that I've mentioned in the video, the party not only became more organised, but between 1924 and 1928, Nazi support did dwindle. So they become more organised, but support for the party actually decreases somewhat. Because, and I'll tell you why, even though you know this already, the years 1924 to 28 are sometimes referred to as the lean years of the Nazi party, the years where they struggle. And they struggle for several reasons. Well, since 1923, inflation had eased. Obviously, we've looked at the work of Gustav Stresemann. There's videos on Stresemann as well already. So the hyperinflation issue had gone away. Employment had increased, so more people had jobs. And the German public generally were better off. Of course, there were still people struggling, of course there were, but generally the German public was much better off. So therefore, many people didn't feel the need for a politician as extreme as Hitler, because there weren't really any extreme problems happening in their lives like there had been before. Likewise, again to do with Stresemann, Germany's international reputation had improved. As I say, there's videos on Stresemann's work already on the channel. And in 1925, Hindenburg had been elected president, and his reputation, because he was a war hero, his reputation was a boost to the Weimar Republic, because they have this great war hero of Germany heading up the Weimar Republic. It increased the reputation of the Weimar Republic. So people who previously had been somewhat critical of the Weimar Republic were now less likely to be. Essentially, if you can sum it up, essentially, as life became easier for the German voters, they became much less drawn to the extreme parties, not just the Nazis, the communists as well. So the support for the extreme parties goes down because, as I say, life gets better. They were satisfied with the Weimar government, not delighted, of course, but they were satisfied with the Weimar government, so therefore the support for the parties who were going to bring in extreme measures went down. In fact, in May 1928, the Nazis only won 12 seats and they had just 2.6% of the whole national vote, which again shows that by May 1928, they really are one of the smaller parties in Germany and not considered a massive threat. However, in 1929, things began to change, because in 1929, get the card ready, in 1929, as you know, there was the Wall Street crash, or Black Thursday as it became known, on the 24th of October 1929. Remember that this was the huge crash of the US stock market, which led to a major downturn in the US economy, and likewise, as well as the US economy, the worldwide economy was affected, because the worldwide economy was tied to the US economy. So the key thing for Germany, from a German perspective, was the US banks, because the economy had taken a hit, recalled the loans it had made to Germany as part of the Dawes Plan. If you remember that, again, there's videos on that already. So as part of the Dawes Plan, America had loaned a lot of money to Germany, to German banks and German industry, and they recalled this money, and this led to a financial crisis in Germany. And here's why. It's a little bit complicated, so I've tried to put it down in black and white. Here's why. So American banks recalled the loans they'd made to the German banks. German banks, because they have to pay this money back, recalled money that they'd lent out to German businesses. So the Americans had lent money to the German banks, and the German banks had lent money to the German businesses. So now you get a repayment. So the German businesses were dependent on these loans. This money that they borrowed, they needed it. So what they had to do, in order to pay that money back to the banks, they either had to sack workers or close in order to be able to pay them back. So literally just close the factory or sell up. So this naturally led to a huge increase in unemployment in Germany, because all of these workers were either being sacked because the businesses were trying to save money, or the businesses had closed full stop. So unemployment really rose up as a result of this. And this Great Depression, as I put it, this Great Depression led to a drop in spending, which led to more factory closures and therefore even more unemployment. So 1929 is a crucial year, because it's where the German economy really does take a downturn. And in fact, that key statistic that I've used time and time again with you guys in class, unemployment had reached 6 million in Germany in January 1933. 6 million people unemployed. Huge numbers. And as you well know, kind of from this and from the work that we've done on the Great Depression, this Great Depression had a huge effect on pretty much every group of people in Germany. There weren't too many people in Germany who weren't affected by the Great Depression. I mean, for instance, businessmen obviously struggled due to a drop in spending, and obviously many workers became unemployed, so loads and loads of people were affected by this. More than 50% of young people, that's aged 16 to 30, were unemployed. So 1 in 2 people aged between 16 and 30 in Germany were unemployed. Even highly qualified people, so it didn't matter, even if you had a degree or you had a really good qualification, it didn't really matter. As I said, 50% of young people were unemployed. 4 out of every 10 factory workers were unemployed. So nearly half the factory workers in Germany were unemployed. One thing that really affected the majority of people in Germany at this time were the subsequent measures taken by the Chancellor, Brüning. Obviously, this creates a huge crisis in Germany, so the Chancellor, Brüning, has to act. Now, what he did was he introduced several unpopular measures, including tax rises and cuts to unemployment benefits. So essentially, to save money, there were so many people unemployed, and Brüning said, well, we're going to have to cut the amount that we give in unemployment benefit. Even though we've got a lot of unemployed people, obviously we're spending a huge amount of money on paying their benefits, so we're going to have to cut unemployment benefit, we're going to have to lower it, which naturally really upset all the people who were unemployed, because they were already suffering, and now they were getting even less money from the government. And on top of that, those people who were employed were given huge tax rises. So whether you had a job or didn't have a job, either way, people in Germany really felt like they were, being punished or really bearing the brunt of this Great Depression. So those measures, both of them, were really unpopular. And naturally, that's when people started to look around for alternatives. Brüning's doing this, we don't like it, what are the alternatives? And the Nazis are one party that people start to look at. But the important question, and it's a question that a lot of people ask, because we look at it with a 2022 mindset of, non-extremism. It's how can this party, this Nazi party, this deplorable party that we've seen, how can that party become so popular? What was the appeal of the Nazis, and why was Hitler, key question, able to become Chancellor? Well, for starters, that's number one, which you know about already, the failure of the Weimar government during the Great Depression. Extreme parties like the Nazis and the Communists appealed to voters because they promised very radical solutions. You guys haven't got jobs, so we're going to get you a job. Remember that the Nazis used very simple slogans, such as work and bread. What do people want? Well, they want work because they're unemployed, and they want bread, food. So we'll use really simple slogans of, do you know what, if you vote for the Nazis, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get work and you're going to get bread. You're going to get work and you're going to get food. It sounds really simple, because it is, but it works. Yeah? What do people want? Let's just offer them, or promise them, what they want. Work and bread, work and food. As well as that, Hitler had a huge appeal. Hitler's appeal. He gave great speeches. He appeared very strong. That's the key word. Strong, organised, disciplined. Here we've got a Germany that's in a lot of chaos, and a lot of Germans kind of look back at the previous Germany, when Germany used to be really, really powerful before the First World War. What did Germany have? Well, they had a Kaiser, a strong Kaiser, one person who was strong, organised, making all the decisions. Hitler reminds many people of the Kaiser, or similar to the Kaiser. So again, that's a huge appeal to many German people. Another thing that helped the Nazis appeal to German voters was propaganda. The Nazis were very effective in propaganda. They used a wide range of propaganda, which I'll come on to in a minute. But one thing, and a lot of you wrote about this in the exam actually, was that they were very, very good at... they were quick to change messages and policies if they weren't popular. For example, they briefly toy with the idea of nationalising industry, but it doesn't appeal very much to German industrialists, because if you nationalise industry, it means the government take control of industry, and therefore many businessmen were like, whoa, that means we have to give up control of our factories or whatever. That's not very popular. So the Nazis very quickly abandoned that idea. They go, we're going to lose votes here. If we keep up this idea, loads of industrialists and factory owners and whatnot and businessmen aren't going to vote for us, so drop that. So they're very quick to, pick up an idea and drop it if it didn't sit or it didn't stick. But as well, the Nazis had 8 different newspapers that were each aimed at a different group of people. So, for example, you'd have a newspaper that was maybe aimed at the working classes, and maybe one that was aimed at women. So again, they can get their ideas across to a whole group of a whole range of different groups of people. There were obviously the rallies, which again, linking back to that appeal of Hitler, the rallies obviously give this idea of strength and discipline and order at a time when Germany is in a lot of chaos. Another key appeal of the Nazis and Hitler was fear of communism. Obviously the Nazis were seen as the anti-communist party. And this was obviously, this policy of anti-communism was really, really popular with businessmen and farmers. Businessmen obviously are thinking, well, if Germany becomes communist, there will be no private business, so I will lose my business. Therefore, I'm going to vote for the Nazis because they'll make sure that we don't go communist. Farmers as well, because again, communism would involve no private land, or the land being distributed equally. So if you're a farmer with a huge amount of land, you're thinking, well, again, if Germany becomes communist, I'm going to lose the bulk of my land, or maybe even all of my land. So therefore, I'm going to vote for the Nazis because they'll make sure that doesn't happen. So fear of communism was another big contributing factor, or a big appeal to many people of the Nazis. Another one, which I've kind of mentioned already a little bit, was they were seen as the party of discipline and order. It talks about Hitler being strong, disciplined, organised, the rallies being strong, disciplined, organised, but also you've got the SA. By 1930, there were 400,000 people, or members of the SA. And again, they really gave off this impression of order and discipline, especially at these rallies. Remember as well that the SA were used very effectively by the Nazis to disrupt other party meetings. So the SA would go in, usually in disguise, to other party meetings and cause disruption, fights and things like that. And therefore that gave the impression to other people in Germany that, I don't know, the Communist Party or whatever were really, really disorganised or out of control or chaotic because the Nazi SA were going in there and causing trouble. As well as that, the Nazis, or Hitler and the Nazis, had very traditional views. So if you're a traditionalist, particularly like the middle classes, they thought there'd been a bit of a moral decline. In 1920s Germany, there'd been a moral decline. So, women going out on their own and all this, and smoking and all this kind of stuff. So many people who were traditionalists thought, well, it's great that if we vote for the Nazis, they'll bring back this traditional, way of behaving, and they'll encourage that. Many women actually did vote for the Nazis because they thought they gave off, ironically, they thought it gave off like a family values idea. Crazy when you think about it like that. Essentially, in short, because I've rattled through a lot of things there, essentially, in short, the Nazis had something for everyone. They appealed to rich people, poor people, employed people, unemployed people, men, women, etc., for different reasons. And their support really did grow. It really grew. If you want some figures, I've written down here because I always get my figures wrong. May 1928, they had 12 seats, and in terms of numbers of votes, 810,000 votes. Okay, or 810,127 to be exact. By September 1930, so less than 2 years later, they had 107 seats, 6.3 million votes, and then in July 1932, they had 230 seats and 13.7 million votes. Those figures right there, rewind if you've forgotten them and write them down, those figures right there show just how quickly and how much the Nazi Party really did grow. So how did Hitler become Chancellor in January 1933? The key question. Well, in April 1932, Hitler ran for president against Hindenburg. They had the presidential elections in Germany. Hitler ran for president against Hindenburg. He lost, but he polled 13 million votes, which naturally increased his political standing in Germany, because you can stand there and go, well, 13 million people voted for me to be president. In the same month, Chancellor Brüning, was overthrown by a coalition of right-wing army officers and landowners and industrialists. And Hindenburg replaced Brüning as Chancellor with Franz von Papen. Now, in July 1932, as I've just mentioned, the Nazis became the biggest party in the Reichstag, over 13 million votes, over 200 seats. Now, von Papen really struggled to keep his coalition together, as it was weak. Now, in November 1932, another election was called, because they were having loads of elections when these weak coalitions couldn't get things sorted out. They were having election after election. So in November 1932, another election was called, and once again the Nazis won the most seats in the Reichstag. They got 190 seats. So ever so slightly less than they got before, but they still got a huge amount of seats. Von Papen then resigned on the 17th of November 1932 and was replaced by Kurt von Schleicher. Now, von Schleicher tried to get Hindenburg to suspend the constitution and make him head of a military dictatorship. But this request was actually leaked, it got out, and he lost support of the Reichstag, because obviously the Reichstag were horrified. They went, oh, von Schleicher's trying to make himself a military dictator, we don't want this. Now, von Papen, in the meantime, had convinced Hindenburg that he should give the chancellorship to Hitler. So von Papen said to Hindenburg, actually, do you know what? You probably should make Hitler chancellor, even though you don't like him and I don't like him. If you make me, von Papen, vice-chancellor, I can control Hitler for you. I can manipulate and control him, so don't worry, we'll be able to control him. Obviously, with hindsight, it was a ridiculous thing to say, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. So Hindenburg agreed to this, wrongly agreed to this, and on the 30th of January 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Now, In my next video that I'm aiming to do in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to do another video, this time on how Hitler basically took Germany, once he became Chancellor, how Hitler took Germany from a democracy to a dictatorship. So that'll be the next video that I'll do in the next week or so, all being well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.